Good morning. We would like to welcome you here today to celebrate the gift of life that God created in Dr. Edward C. Williams, and to remember the continued love that we share, whether in life or in death. As the Apostle Paul writes in Romans 14, we do not live to ourselves, and we do not die to ourselves. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. Let's continue in prayer. Eternal God, you gave us life, and we know that you are always more ready to hear us than we are to pray. You know our needs even before we ask. So we ask that you would show us your grace now, that as we face the mystery of death, we may see the light of your undying love. In the stillness of these moments, speak to us of eternal things, so that we may be lifted above distress and into your peace that passes all understanding. In Jesus' name, amen.
Kind of feels like deja vu up here. Yes, it was only 56 days ago I stood in front of you all to eulogize my mom. Now we are gathered together again, much too soon, to celebrate the life of my dad, Edward Charles Williams. I've got to be honest, it's been rough to lose both parents so close together. However, our family was exceptionally fortunate to have had our parents live for 94 and a half and 95 years. They were healthy, happy, and active, almost up until the very end of their lives. I also want to give credit to Independence Village in Petoskey, where they lived their last 5 years. It was wonderful for them to live there in their final years, full of friends, activities, celebrations, music concerts, outings, and most importantly, a kind and caring staff. They were happy there, and it was a huge comfort to us to know they were safe, they were not alone, and they weren't bored. We have been more fortunate than most families. My dad outlived everybody's predictions for his length of life, including his own. Dad lost his father at age 66 from a heart attack and his mother at age 75 from a stroke. His older brother Bob, who he idolized and followed into the orthodontic profession, had his first heart attack in his early 50s and died young. So my dad always thought he would die young, too. Dad was so extremely type A, we all assumed he would suffer a stroke or heart attack early as well. Boy, did he fool us. I think the reason my dad lived for so long, for 95 years and 3 months, is he never stopped moving. His heart was in really great shape. Dad worked incredibly hard and never sat still. Even when he was sitting still, he was fidgeting. I have never met anyone like my dad. His energy level was his most apparent personality characteristic. He was known as Fast Eddie and the Energizer Bunny his whole life. Everybody kidded him about his boundless energy. I used to joke that my dad walked at a slant. He would come home from work, from the office every night, and would zoom through the room at a slant, like this. Whoosh! Dad was always moving and driven. He was just a huge fireball of energy that didn't dwindle until his final 6 months, when impinged nerves in his back forced him into a wheelchair. Even then, he learned how to propel himself anywhere he wanted to go. Even a wheelchair didn't stop him. My dad worked in the yard at the cottage every day until his early 90s. He did a ton of physically demanding work too, cleaning muck out of the creeks, hauling wood around in wheelbarrows, moving rocks around, splitting firewood, raking leaves, you name it. He swept the deck at least twice a day too. I also had to stop him one time in his late 80s from getting up on a step stool with the leaf blower to blow out the gutters. Dad simply did not know how to age like a normal person. Burt Lake was definitely Dad's special place. He put his heart and soul into building the cottage and maintaining it in the yard for 50 years. He did more in his 80s than most men do in their 30s, seriously. Besides yard work, Dad worked off his excess energy by being very athletic. He loved all kinds of sports and participated in something every week of his life. He ran cross country in high school, but gave up running in college. He learned golf while in college and played often. My dad had 3 holes in one in his lifetime, which is pretty dang rare. Dad played many country club invitationals, both in Midland and in Erie with his older brother Bob every summer. They really enjoyed that time together. Dad even got into Wii golf at Independence Village in his late 80s. How cool is that they offered Wii golf for all these old-time golfers? The instructor told me that Dad even did more instructing than he did. Can you imagine that? No. Dad often told the story of taking me golfing at the country club as a little girl. I was probably 7, and I had 68 strokes on the first hole. That was pretty much the end of my interest in golfing. I got tired of hearing the story of how bad I was, and I just wasn't interested. Dad regretted introducing me to the sport this way and told me later many times he wished he'd just set me up with a pro instead. Dad also enjoyed tennis and downhill skiing most of his life. We were regulars at Boyne Mountain and Nubs Knob growing up. Dad also had ski trips to Vail many years with his dental school buddies. I joined them several times when I lived in Denver, and those guys were a lot of fun and excellent skiers to boot. Dad was also in the Monday Night Curling League in Midland for many years. I vividly remember him racing out the door after dinner at a slant in his curling clothes to meet up with his curling buddies every week. My dad loved people and socializing. Gregarious is the word I would use to describe him. Gregarious and animated. He was at his best and happiest when surrounded by friends. He was also constantly talking. Dad always complained about his older sister Alma talking too much, but he was just as talkative as she was. He just wouldn't admit it. Dad's favorite food was a good steak. He loved steak on the grill. He also loved shrimp cocktail and ate it often. And he loved cookies his whole life, mainly Oreos. As teenagers, we 4 girls used to beg Mom not to buy them, or at least hide them, because we couldn't resist them either. But Mom always said, "Well, I have to buy them. Your dad likes them." She was always trying to put weight on him. Dad loved his martinis and Manhattans with Mom after work, too. It was definitely their evening ritual before dinner. My dad enjoyed spending time with his 3 siblings. He really loved having his younger brother, Jack, come every summer to our cottage and bring his 2 kids, John and Sherry, who are here today. We loved spending time with them, too. Anyway, Dad valued his 3 siblings and tried to spend time with them often, despite the distance. There are several times that stand out when my dad particularly enjoyed being a grandfather. He used to take our son Kevin, the first grandson, out fishing quite a bit at the cottage. Kevin was addicted to fishing at an early age. And in fact, he now spends half his year as a charter boat fisherman in Alaska, taking people out salmon and halibut fishing. Anyway, Dad told me forever how much he enjoyed fishing with Kevin as a little boy and hearing Kevin say, "Grandpa, fix my lure, fix my lure." My dad also took Kevin to the hunt club when he was 13. Kevin shot his first buck, and my dad was thrilled. He really enjoyed that experience and those memories and talked with me often about them. My dad probably wished he had a son or two instead of 4 daughters, but I don't ever recall hearing him say that. I'm also impressed with all the community service Dad did. He gave countless hours to bettering his community. Everything Dad did, he was truly in it for the long haul. He took his commitments seriously. Dad was a member of Aquinas for over 50 years. He was in clubs in Midland, Indian River, and Naples, Florida. He did not take a break from serving his community when they started spending winters in Florida, or when they started living full-time at the cottage in their mid-80s. I've been in Rotary for 19 years, and I know how much time I devote to community service. It is very rare to have someone attain 50 years in Kiwanis or Rotary. I only know of a few Rotarians who have 50 years, and I just learned we have a Rotarian in the audience. How many years have you been in Rotary, Jim?
58.
Woo! Very cool. Anyway, it is extremely rare to find that level of dedication, but Mom and Dad were like that. My dad also got involved in Habitat for Humanity after retiring. He spent every week building houses for people in need. Dad didn't work with power tools at all when we were growing up. He always said he was afraid of losing a finger or maiming himself, and he would lose his ability to be an orthodontist. He showed me the homes he worked on, and he was very proud of his contributions, as he should be. He worked with a crew of other retirees, many 80 years and older, in Naples. Pretty incredible. Besides long-term devotion to serving their communities, Mom and Dad were committed to each other in their marriage. They almost made it to 66 years before Mom passed away in June. Their 66th anniversary would have been July 27th. They missed it by only 42 days. I had my moments with Dad through the years, and my mom and sisters did as well. He could be intense and hyper-focused on something so much it could drive you nuts. He could be tough on us too, his girls. He wasn't the easiest guy to live with sometimes, and we butted heads often when I was growing up. Perhaps it was harder for me, as I was the oldest daughter, and I had to break him in. Dad could be stubborn and opinionated. My dad also had a lot of anxiety, which made him hard to live with. Mom had the patience of a saint and was definitely his Valium. My dad was a nervous driver. If he had ever seen an accident in a particular spot, he told you about it for the rest of your life. It's true. I remember him being nervous driving in big cities while we were growing up. Mom would tell him, "This is our exit," and Dad would drive right by it, claiming, "It didn't register. It didn't register, Sally." I'm omitting the expletives. Again, Mom had incredible patience and calmness, and around the cloverleaf we would go until we got back to the right exit. Dad was also quite OCD about organizing his stuff. One of his favorite expressions was, "I've got to get organized." Pencils were always lined up in order of length. He would breeze through a room and straighten things, magazines, Afghans, cushions, and other stuff. He was constantly arranging things and then rearranging them. The problem was, he liked to organize everyone else. If you left anything sitting around, it was bound to be relocated to a new position. This happened particularly at the cottage and included shoes, bathing suits, magazines and books, partially eaten snacks or drinks. Anything and everything got moved. It drove us nuts. I honestly don't know how Mom could stand it, yet I don't ever remember her making a big deal about it. It was just Dad trying to be helpful. I think this was his way of trying to contribute to running the household. And I'm sure it was tough having 4 daughters and their friends over and having company all the time. I do think Dad mellowed as he aged, or perhaps I did. This need for organization and tidiness is something I inherited from him, but hopefully not to the same degree. My dad always said, if you want to help me, help your mother. He always gave Mom all the credit for how their 4 girls turned out, but I think he deserves some credit for raising us also. My dad passed along his strong work ethic, his love of people, his honesty and integrity, his organizational skills, his love of staying active and busy, and his interest in helping others to all of his daughters. He was an intelligent and ambitious man who was respected by his peers. You can ask Dr. Bakeman. He was also a man with many interests and hobbies, and one who was never, ever bored. I think the characteristic all of us wish he would have passed along more of, however, was his endless ed energy. Dad was always enthusiastic and energetic, and none of us can ever come close to him in that way. Dad was a good person, a helpful man, an excellent orthodontist, and a devoted husband and father. My parents loved Midland just as they loved Burt Lake. It's a great comfort for me to know that my parents will rest for eternity so close to our home on Valley Drive. Finally, I want to mention that in his later years, my dad became very fond of saying, "Good night, Irene," at the end of the day, his signature bedtime sign-off. "Good night, Irene." We really don't know why this became one of his favorite sayings, but since his death, I have learned more about this expression. "Good Night, Irene" was the #1 song in 1950 for a while. Dad was 22 then. And 1950 was the beginning of the Korean War, where he spent 2 years overseas serving in the U.S. Army. So perhaps that time overseas became more significant to him as he got older. So for something lighthearted and fun, we will be listening to that 1950 rendition shortly to remember my dad and those times in his life. So for the final time, good night, Irene. I love you.
Duplication, I've been revising my content.
Me too.
Okay, get your pen out because you may have to edit again. So I too was going to start with deja vu.
Yeah.
We're here again. Many of you are probably in the same seats. I purposely shook it up here. Susan, mine, I think Wendy. But I bet there's a few of you out there in the same seats. But today we're here about Dad. Couple things. You've covered some. His energy. Yes, Energizer Bunny. Crazy Eddie. You'll also see at the country club, Steady Eddie. I've got something I got to take to the country club. I'll put it on the tables and you can read about Steady Eddie. I think if you met him, you'd understand the nicknames. Boundless energy, driven, achiever, go-getter. His organizational skills could put many to shame, and a couple of us have inherited those skills.
No.
He always was making to-do lists to scratch things off upon completion. I do the same thing. Ask my husband. I'll write things down just to cross them off because it makes me feel like I've done something for the day. As we understand from some of the stories we've heard, and we've got some people here who may be able to give some more detail about these stories, but there were a couple things we heard about as children that indicated that he had this energy early on. I mean, can you imagine Ed Williams as a 2-year-old? His poor mother. One of the things she assigned him to do was straightening the tassels on a rug. So, you know, there's tassels on the end, and as 4 kids are running in and out of the house, the tassels would get messed up. And Dad was given a comb, and he was expected to smooth them out. So she started him early with this organizational and straightening, jobs. I also wonder how, pretty smart woman. She's cultivating his interest in orthodontics, straightening things up. Think about that. She probably could occupy him a couple hours every day, maybe, straightening tassels on rugs. We also heard the story about the swimming pool, and we need some of the Williams here to corroborate this. He always wanted a swimming pool. And one day, he and one of his brothers, most likely your father, Jack, I don't see Sherry out there right now, raise your hand. Most likely, he enlisted Jack to go out and start digging a swimming pool. And as I understand, they made a lot of progress that day until Dad got, Grandpa, DL, got home and said, no. They had to fill the pool back in. Even in retirement, Sue said, habitat. Those fingers, he finally could use power tools. And he did love it. He even showed me Habitat. I've got the t-shirt from Habitat Naples. No task was beneath him. At their Florida condo, he signed up to be the bicycle license checker. Say that quickly 3 times. And he took that seriously. He would go to all the garages where the bicycles were stored with his checklist and made sure that every bike was identified, and if it didn't have a license, he took care of it. He made sure that people were conforming with the requirements of the condo association. We've heard rumors, too, that I suspect are true. Maybe Pam knows this out there, wherever you are. He would rearrange the bulletin boards down in the community areas to make sure that everything was lined up.
Yep.
Most recently, he kept seniors at Independence Village in line. Sue said he was helpful. He was outgoing. He loved meeting people. He had the list of all the residents, the phone list, the room numbers, their names, and he would check them off as he met them. And he would make little notes in the margin so that next time he met them, he could remember something about them to bring into the conversation. Even in January of this year, I went to visit them. Dad's the elevator guy. He's holding the elevator door. And the ladies are coming down the hall like this, they're walkers, and Dad's holding the elevator going, hut-to, 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 hut-to. He never forgot the guy. The other thing about Ed, his girls, 1, 2, 3, 4. I lost track, hang on. I've got to skip around. I've been going through Dad's stuff. Believe me, he saved everything. And I found this. Why would he save this? On this side, Innisbrook. What is that? Google tells me it's a golf course northwest of St. Pete. Somebody knows that? It's still there. They got a pretty nice website. It's not dated, but it's pretty old. 2 dogs, $1.50. 3 beers, $2.10. He has saved this forever. On the other side, God made earth and rested. God made man and rested. Then God made woman. Since then, no one has rested. I don't know if this is his dad, DL. I don't know if this is a golf buddy, whatever, but he saved this all these years. And that accurately describes Dad's world after marrying Mom, when his days of being outnumbered by women began. Not only did he have a mother, Martha, and a sister, Alma, he had a new wife and a mother-in-law. And then in a span of 6 years, 4 daughters were born. It's actually under 6 years, 4 daughters. They always said they were making up for lost time. They were older. By the time Dad got out of Korea, started his practice, they were getting up there in age, and they really wanted to get a family established fast, so in true Dad form, 4 girls, 6 years. All these women, more recently known as, and I've cleaned this up, all these damn women. I think we drove him nuts.
These 5 damn women.
These 5 damn women?
5 damn women.
5, okay. And you took out some more of the expletives. Can you imagine 4 daughters? Can you imagine 4 teenage daughters? And can you imagine 4 teenage daughters driving? He had AAA car insurance on whatever the 70s version of speed dial was. Which car now, Ed? I recall a 1976 Pontiac Grand Prix, for those motorheads out there, probably a 440 caliber, or whatever you call it, horsepower, 8-cylinder, yeah. Grand Prix, SJ, whatever, white, red interior. Each daughter wrecked that car. You first in Indianapolis, you hit somebody head on. Wendy got rear-ended, I think. I can't remember what Ann did.
Nothing, never.
And there's witnesses here. We got to be careful. And then I got broadsided out in Eastman and Saginaw, and that took care of that car. But each daughter, each side of that car. And then there were the deer hits. Another one of the Edisms, watch for deer.
Yep.
I think after Dad, Wendy has the record on deer hits. Yep. Yeah, what's that? She's an ace, yep.
You're not going to tell the story where when I hit the deer and he
Pulled-
picked me up.
Yeah, out on US 10, Wendy hits a deer after Thanksgiving. Dad drives out there in my grandfather's Buick Park Avenue, white, red interior, pulls the deer out of the front end of a Cutlass Supreme, Grandma's Cutlass Supreme, pulls it out, shoves it in the passenger seat of the car, drives it home. I don't know if Kevin and Ann were married yet. Brian and I might have been married yet. Guts and cleans that deer in the garage, props it out in the front yard up against the tree.
Sorry, Mrs. Kendall.
Mrs. Kendall left already.
That deer
But-
hanging in the
Yeah, that's Dad. And then there's his work ethic. Early on, Dad began instilling his work ethic into his daughters. I expect we all have different experiences or different recollections of similar experiences, but these stick in my mind. As young as 4 or 5, when we lived at the Chatham Courthouse, I remember him telling me, you go out and pick up those sticks in the yard and dump them in the garden, and I'll give you a nickel. I'm game, I'm out there, I'm picking up sticks, because that bought a lot of candy in 1964, 65. We were all required to mow the lawn at the Valley Drive house. Of course, because of the way Dad's organized, he had that yard divvied up into 3 quadrants. Mowed the front right, $2. Front left, $2. Backyard, $3. You could make $7 mowing the whole yard. That was pretty good. I don't know that he paid Mom, but Mom mowed that yard too. When he needed a helper to install a split rail fence, I recall being the helper. You said he didn't have a son. Sometimes I felt like I was his son. I'll get Cindy to do it. When he needed a helper to put the dock in or take it out at the cottage, I was his helper, I seem to recall. When he wanted someone to help him plant hundreds of tree seedlings in the garden at the house on Valley Drive, Wendy's cracking up, yep. Cindy, get the shovel. Then when the seedlings were a little bigger and he wanted to dig them up, Cindy, let's dig them up. And then we schlepped them all up to the cottage and we planted them there. And some of those trees are still there, 50 some years later. When he needed logs split for firewood at the cottage. Here, Cindy, here's an axe and an awl. Go for it. But there was one time when he handed me the chainsaw. And he started explaining how to use it. And Mom must have been watching out the window. And we hear this, Ed, no. And that was the end of that. And I expect every one of us got dragged into something to help him maintain the property. One thing for certain, Dad believed in hard work. Another Edism is the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. Because I'm his daughter, I'm going to say that again. Do your ABCs. The only place success comes before work is in the dictionary, and he believed that. He believed in education was the most important thing he could provide to his daughters. We were fed a steady stream of another Edism that went something like this. Let's see if we can all do this together. You need to get an education so you can get a job to support yourself, so you don't have to depend on a man to support you. Or some version of that almost every night at dinner when he had a captive audience of 4 daughters. We would roll our eyes and go, oh. But at some point in my late 20s, I realized, Dad, we all did get an education thanks to you. We all can support ourselves thanks to you. We were listening. We'll just never admit we were listening. So, Dad, thanks for everything you did for us and the opportunities that you provided. Good night, Irene.
Good morning, everyone. I feel like this is going to be a lot of repetition. I think we all wrote the same thing separately, with our own style. So we often remember our dad by his many sayings and his one-liners. They're cemented in our brains. Good night, Irene. I heard you, but it just didn't register. You don't have to floss your teeth, just the ones you want to keep. Any old star can shine at night, but it takes a bright star to shine in the morning. Up and at 'em, rise and shine, every morning. Jack and Ed went out to catch flies. Jack gave Ed a pair of black eyes. Jack asked Ed if he wanted some more. Ed said, no, my eyes are too sore. Tell him about the eagle. Did you tell him about the eagle? When we were too slow to do a task, we'd hear, I could do it while you're thinking about it. And whenever there was a full house at the cottage, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. The sewage just couldn't handle it. When he's teaching us all how to golf, grip, stance, swing, over and over. Fast Eddie. Our dad did everything fast, as you all know. He walked fast. Just like Sue said, he was always leaning forward, approaching about a 45-degree angle as he walked through a room. And he was usually about 20 feet ahead of everybody else when you were walking somewhere. He ate fast. He chewed fast. He almost inhaled his food. And he did the dishes fast. He was always up doing the dishes as we were still trying to finish a meal. He organized everything, and he did it fast. You could tell when he'd been in a room, and in our rooms when we were children, he would line up all of our belongings, just like Sue and Cindy Beth said, in a row. You always knew when he had been there, because everything was moved in a perfect line, just like at the office. His instruments had to be in a certain place, always organized. And then 10 minutes later, he would come and reorganize it. So we have a lot of the same memories. He organized and reorganized everything, especially at the cottage, as Sue said. If you put a towel, clothing, shoes, anything out to dry, you knew that it would be moved. It would be somewhere else. You couldn't find your things ever. And stacks of papers, organized and reorganized. Dad drove fast, very fast. Fast Eddie, lead foot. And to that, he braked fast. He used the accelerator and the brake interchangeably. So it was like always back and forth when you were driving, give you a headache. He reacted quickly. He was excitable. Sometimes he angered quickly. I think we could actually see the steam coming out of his ears sometimes, and he often left the dinner table in a huff because he had to deal with all 4 daughters. He loved Michigan football. Every game day, you knew he'd be glued to the TV, or he was in Section 36, Row 72 at Michigan Stadium. They had their season tickets well into their 80s. But when at home, he was sitting on the edge of his seat the entire time, focused, face talking to the TV about a foot from the screen, his hand to his ear so he could hear the TV and block out everything else that was going on around him. He was very intense. He loved listening to Bob Ufer call every game, and we learned as daughters to never call home and interrupt him when a game was on. He was always prepared, like a Boy Scout. He put his breakfast out the night before on the counter and everything was lined up. Cereal box, spoons, bowls, coffee, everything ready to go for the next day. He was always moving, especially at the cottage. He'd spend the entire day working in the yard, clearing out creeks, chopping wood, crawling under the house. And my husband swears he spent one morning moving rocks from one side of the yard to the other, and then come in for lunch. In the afternoon, he'd go move those darn rocks right back where they were to begin with. He was passionate. He was a hard worker. He worked hard and he played hard. Dad loved a good martini or a Manhattan. You could set your watch by our parents' cocktail hour. He loved a good party. Oftentimes, he was the life of the party. He was passionate. He had a hearty laugh, and you could always hear him from above the crowd noise. Our dad was adamant that his 4 daughters got a good education. There was never a question that each of us was going to college to get that education. He knew the value of a good education. He instilled this in his family and his extended family. He often asked his young patients as well at the office, "What are your plans for college?" Dad worked hard to raise capable and well-rounded children, now strong women. He never got a chance to raise sons. He did his best to teach his daughters everything that he would have taught his sons. So we learned how to mow the lawn, shovel snow, drive a boat, how to golf, how to put out sticks to get a rear-wheel drive car up the hill at the cottage. He taught us all how to fish and how to gut a fish. He went deer hunting every fall, but was never successful in teaching any of us to hunt deer or to gut a deer in the front yard. Although at least one fiance almost ran screaming after seeing that deer being gutted in the front yard of Valley Drive. Cleaning and gutting fish was where the 4 daughters drew the line. He was passionate about his profession, dentistry and orthodontia. Everybody in this room has probably had their teeth examined by our father, including soon-to-be in-laws. Apparently having your teeth inspected by Ed was a rite of passage into the family. Open wide. Now bite. Open again. We'd have friends over to the house, and sure enough, he'd be looking at their teeth. I remember watching Miss America with Dad, and he'd be looking at their teeth and commenting, "She's got a class 2 malocclusion." He had all 4 daughters learn a skill in the office. He provided on-the-job training, be it in the front office end, bookkeeping, assisting, taking x-rays, or pouring models in the lab. And the darn lawn. Our father played a large role in shaping our lives and our futures as independent young women, with the skill sets to be successful, confident, and capable young women and adults, happy in our lives to pursue our passions. Dad would listen to our stories about his 8 grandchildren, asking questions about where they live, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and doing his best to keep up with the busy lives that his grandchildren were having. He always invited the grandchildren to the condo in Florida to spend time there and teach them how to golf. And he always wanted his grandchildren to enjoy the cottage. Come and make it your home base. Enjoy the lake. He helped us all shape our lives, and for that we're eternally grateful. We love you, Dad. We miss you. Thank you for the gifts you have given us. Thank you all for coming today to help honor our dad. And in true Ed form, go blue.
Thank you for adding those memories and helping us to fill out this fitting tribute to Ed and his values and his characteristics. The family would like to invite anyone who has a favorite memory or specific Thanksgiving for Ed's life to share it at this time. So if you would please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you.
So what I'm going to say is something that kind of touches on a lot of the things let's call them the girls have said along the way. Following our trip up here a couple of months ago, I'm Dave Williams. I'm Bob, Ed's older brother's son. John is Jack's son, his younger brother. So following our trip up here, let's call it 2 months ago, John suggested that I get involved in 23andMe. So I spit into a tube and sent it off, and they sent a bunch of stuff back. Oh, your earlobes are like this, your hair is going to be falling out, your eyes are probably this color, your toes are this, your fingers are that. But what it didn't have in there was what Ed had, and that was his competitiveness. They've touched on it a little bit, but absolutely his competitiveness. And an example of that was before most of them were born. Again, my dad and Ed would alternate with member guest golf tournaments in Midland and at Lakeshore in Erie, back and forth and back and forth. On one of those trips, a bunch of us went out to the peninsula. And if you've not been to Lake Erie and haven't been to Presque Isle or the peninsula, it's probably the first wonder of the world of Lake Erie. But it's a big, like a 20-mile-long beach that's very nice. But anyhow, so we were out there, and at the time I was between my junior and senior year in high school, so it was about 1968. So I was 17 and Ed was about 40. So we're out on the beach, and we heard that Ed ran cross country and also he ran track in high school. So somehow it came up that I was going to be going after the cross country team in high school the coming year. And so, of course, Ed said, well, let's race. And I said, okay, well, let's race. So we set up a 50-yard or something distance. And he outsmarted me in that he ran along where the water had packed the sand down, and I ran on the more fluffy sand. So I think he nosed me out a little bit in that thing. So not to be taken down at all, said, okay, we're going to do a long jump and see who can do the best there. Now, I don't know how many of you know the specifics of the long jump, but the long jump is you run a certain amount of time, distance. There's a line that you can't cross. If you touch it, then you foul and your jump doesn't count. And then you jump as far as you can, and whatever part of you hits closest to the line is the end of that's the length of the jump. So in the perfect situation, and this was about a year before Bob Beeman set the record by increasing it like 2 feet of 29 feet. You can either hit with your feet and then fall on your butt. That's not good. Or you can hit on your feet and fall back and fall on your hands. That's worse. Or you can hit on your feet and let your momentum carry you over your feet so your heels are the closest thing to the line. But the pit is, let's say 10 feet wide. So we're on this beach and it's, I don't know, how wide do you think beach 6 is? From the 50 yards, I mean, the pit. So the pit is big. So I go first, and so I'm running down, I hit my mark, I'm a fine long jump hit, and hit it pretty well. I mean, I'm not a long jumper, I'm a distance guy, and had a pretty good capture, and stood up, and that was my line. So then Ed says, okay, well, I can do better than that. So he runs, he hits his mark, and doesn't foul, and goes out there really far, but he misjudges it. So his feet are too far in front of him, so he's falling backward. And so suddenly he jumps to the side and puts his hand way out and then kind of scrambles around on the beach like that. And, you know, his feet had hit beyond where my feet had been, but his hand came down way short. And we said, well, you know, you're way short. He said, I was out of the pit. I was out of the pit. So that was a story of Ed and competitiveness against a 17-year-old kid. You know, he claimed to be out of the pit, and I'm sure in his mind he was, but I'm not so sure in my mind. So.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to add memories?
We have some different people from yesterday, so I'd like to repeat
All right.
what I said about Ed
This
yesterday.
is only for the video.
Okay. I'd like to start by saying, as former legal counsel for Black & Decker, circular saws and power tools are called hand tools. So, you know. I only know this story as my dad related to me, but of course, my dad and Ed grew up together, being brothers, and my dad would tell us about, they'd hang out with their group, 5 or 8 buddies, and they'd often throw a football around, and there was a bigger kid in the group who one day says to the group, I don't think any of you guys can tackle me alone, one-on-one. And most of the guys in the group are like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. And Ed says, I'll do it. and the guy with the football, okay, and you go down there and I'll start out here. And the guy starts out and breaks into a run and comes at him, knocks him down right on the spot, knocks out his 2 front teeth. There you go, I did it.
Another root of his dental interest, maybe.
He's working on business, unintended.
Root. Are there any other memories or Thanksgivings we want to share? All right. Can stand and
It still
face
doesn't work, so
only for the video.
Oh. I'm one of the sons-in-law that belong to one of these ladies up here, and golf was something that Ed took quite seriously. It wasn't a pastime, it wasn't a hobby, it was more like a second career that he didn't get paid for. I played golf, but it was only as an excuse to spend time with my dad. And one day, I played golf sometimes, okay? At some point in my life, I played 2 or 3 times a week, and my game never suffered if I spent 3 years away from it. So that tells you how my game was. So we're down in Florida, and Ed invited me to play golf. And I thought, well, it's a breakthrough, right? So I go out to play golf with him, and he's got this big Bertha driver, which is fairly new to him. And I've got rented clubs, and I'm playing my normal game, which is bad. So he's bugging me. You know, Ed could be very persistent. You got to try this golf. You got to try this driver. Got to try the driver. So finally, about halfway through the game, I try the driver, and he's giving me all kinds of pointers. Do the stance, grip, swing, watch the ball, and I hit the ball, and it goes a country mile, and it arcs away over some condo unit. And in between that condo unit and the next condo unit, it goes right through somebody's window. We hear the crash, and of course, Ed's lighting out at 100 miles an hour, goes over there, and it went through this guy's window, and this poor guy was some veteran, and he's scrambling around on the floor, he's thinking he's under fire, right? And, well, of course, I paid for the window, and was never invited to play golf again. So, anyway, that was Ed. So,
Competitive and persistent.
I just have a question. I would love to know about the shirt up there and what the the girls selected it for?
Who wants to start?
So, Section 36, row 72. They're season tickets at Michigan for years. And so he got to learn who everybody was sitting around him. And they know Dad like we know Dad. Here comes that guy that's going to yell through the whole game, has a lot of commentary for every play that's going on. And it was 1985? Where he kept yelling, Harbaugh to Colasar, Harbaugh to Colasar, come on, Harbaugh, throw it to Colasar. And he was yelling it and yelling it and yelling it. And finally, the play comes, and it was Harbaugh to Colasar, and they won the game in the last few seconds because of that one touchdown throw. So the guys that sat next to him had that shirt made, so the next time he showed up in Michigan Stadium, they gave it to him. And Cindy even found the receipt that came with it, because they had it made specially for him and sent it to him. You know, he was someone that was a constant in their section, and they
Schnapps Boys. Explain the Schnapps Boys.
Oh, I don't know the story there.
All right, you want to do it? You get up and do the Schnapps Boys.
Oh, well, yeah, there might have been a little bit of imbibing back then before they shut down.
Well, it was back when you could drink alcohol at Michigan Stadium, and these boys would come in and they would buy little bottles of schnapps from A to Z. And they would continually, through the game, drink from A to Z the schnapps. And that's why they were called the Schnapps Boys. It's called Remember Me. Speak of me as you have always done. Remember the good times, laughter, and fun. Share the happy memories we've made. Do not let them wither or fade. I'll be with you in the summer sun and when the winter's chill has come. I'll be the voice that whispers in the breeze. I'm peaceful now, put your mind at ease. I've rested my eyes and gone to sleep, but memories we've shared are yours to keep. Sometimes our final days may be a test, but remember me when I was my best. Although the things may not be the same, do not be afraid to use my name. Let your sorrow last for just a while. Comfort each other and try to smile. I've lived a life filled with joy and fun. Live on now. Make me proud of what you've become.
Thank you, Wendy. And we'll continue with another moment of focusing on some of those memories, those good thoughts, those catchphrases as we listen to the song, Good Night, Irene.
Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dream. Last Saturday night I got married. Me and my wife settled down. Now me and my wife are parting. I'm gonna take another stroll downtown. Well, Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dream. Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in town. Sometimes I take a great notion to jump into the river and drown. Well, Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dream.
Stop rambling. Stop your gambling. Stop staying out late at night. Go home to your wife and family. stay there by your fireside bright.
Well, Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
I'd like to close with a prayer giving thanksgiving for Ed's life. Let us pray. O God of generations that rise and pass away, we thank you for your gift of life and memory and happiness. We praise you for all your children who have lived life surrounded by you in faith. We especially thank you for your child, Edward. We praise you for the gift of his life. We thank you for all in him that was good and faithful. We thank you for the grace that you gave him that enabled him to love and care for others. We thank you for all of his uniqueness, his boundless energy, his serving and improving people's lives, his gift of being social and staying active, his hard work in the yard and at the lake. We thank you, O Lord, that for Edward death is past and pain is ended, and that he now rests in the peace that you have prepared. Now we pray, O God, that in your compassion you would look tenderly upon your children gathered here, who are confronted with sorrow and loss. Lighten our darkness with your presence and assure us of your love. Let our whole world experience the signs of your kingdom coming, of households and cities being built on your mercy and your generosity, upon your provision for the future and your care for the welfare of all. Enable us, O God, to see beyond this place and time to that eternal kingdom promised in Jesus Christ. Amen. Ed's family would like to invite all of you to continue to remember and celebrate his life with the lunch at the Midland Country Club to follow this service. And so now as we go, I pray that you would go in the peace of God that passes all understanding, that your hearts and your minds would be kept in the love of Jesus Christ, from which we cannot be separated. And may the blessings of God Almighty be with you and remain with you always. Amen.